The timeline below shows the date of publication of major scientific experiments. See also Timeline of scientific discoveries, Timeline of historic inventions, List of timelines of science and technology, List of famous experiments, Timeline of the history of scientific method. 2nd century BC, 240 BC Eratosthenes measures the Earth's circumference and diameter. 8th century AD, Jabir ibn Hayyan introduces the experimental method and controlled experiment in chemistry. 10th century, Muhammad ibn Zakaria Razi introduces controlled experiment into the field of medicine and carried out the first medical experiment in order to find the most hygienic place to build a hospital. 11th century, 1020 Avicenna introduces experimentation and quantification into the study of medicine and physiology, including the introduction of experimental medicine and clinical trials in the canon of medicine. 1021 Ibn al-Haytham pioneers the experimental scientific method and experimental physics in his Book of Optics, where he devises the first scientific experiments on optics, including the first use of the camera obscura to prove that light travels in straight lines and the first experimental proof that visual perception is caused by light rays traveling to the eyes, which also marks the beginning of experimental psychology and psychophysics. 1030 Abu Rayhan al-Biruni conducts the first elaborate experiments related to astronomical phenomena and introduces the experimental method into mechanics. 12th century, 1121 Al-Khazini makes extensive use of the experimental method to prove his theories on mechanics in the Book of the Balance of Wisdom. Ibn Zur is the first physician to carry out human post-mortem dissections and autopsies. He proves that the skin disease scabies is caused by a parasite, a discovery which upsets the Hippocratic and Galenic theory of humorism. 13th century, 1200 Abd el-Latif observes and examines a large number of skeletons, and he discovered that Galen was incorrect regarding the formation of the bones of the lower jaw and sacrum. 1242 Ibn al-Nafis carries out autopsies which leads him to the discovery of pulmonary circulation and the circulatory system. Kamal al-Din al-Farisi provides the first correct explanation of the rainbow phenomenon and uses the experimental method to prove his theory. Albertus Magnus documents that nitric acid can dissolve silver and the resulting silver nitrate solution will blacken skin. 17th century, 1609 Galileo Galilei observes moons of Jupiter in support of the heliocentric model. 1638 Galileo Galilei uses rolling balls to disprove the Aristotelian theory of motion. 1665 Robert Hooke, using a microscope, observes cells. 1672 Isaac Newton publishes the results of his prism experiments, demonstrating the existence in white light of a mixture of distinct colored rays. 1676 Ole Roma measures the speed of light for the first time. 1687 Isaac Newton publishes the thought experiment. Newton's cannonball hypothesizes that the force of gravity is universal and is the key force for planetary motion. 18th century, 1747 James Lind conducts one of the earliest European clinical trials, showing that scurvy was cured by consuming fresh oranges and lemons, but not other tested acids or drinks. 1774 Charles Mason conducts an experiment near the Scottish mountain of Schiehallion that attempts to measure the mean density of the Earth for the first time, known as the Schiehallion experiment. 1796 Edward Jenner tests the first vaccine. 1798 Henry Cavendish, torsion bar experiment to measure Newton's gravitational constant. 19th century, 1801 Thomas Young, double-slit experiment demonstrates the wave nature of light. 1820 Hans Christian Ørsted discovers the connection of electricity and magnetism. 1843 James Prescott Joule measures the equivalence between mechanical work and heat, resulting in the law of conservation of energy. 1845 Christian Doppler demonstrates the Doppler shift. 1851 Élie N. Foucault uses Foucault pendulums to demonstrate the rotation of the Earth. 1859 Charles Darwin publishes The Origin of Species, showing that evolution occurs by natural selection. 1861 Louis Pasteur disproves the theory of spontaneous generation. 1863 Gregor Mendel's pea-plant experiments. 1887 Heinrich Hertz discovers the photoelectric effect. 1887 Michelson and Morley. Michelson-Morley experiment showing that the speed of light is invariant. 1896 Henry Becquerel discovers radioactivity. 1897 J. Thomson discovers the electron. 20th century. 1909 Robert Millikan, oil drop experiment which suggests that electric charge occurs as quanta. 1911 Ernest Rutherford's gold foil experiment determines the shape of the atom. 1911 Heike-Kamerlingons, superconductivity. 1919 Arthur Eddington, Our Sun as Gravitational Lens, a proof of the theory of relativity. 1920 Otto Stern and Walter Gerlach conduct the Stern-Gerlach experiment, which demonstrates particle spin. 1920 John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner conduct the Little Albert experiment. 1928 Griffith's experiment shows that living cells can be transformed via a transforming principle, later discovered to be DNA. 1934 Enrico Fermi splits the atom. 1935 Lady Tasting Tea experiment by Ronald A. Fisher, foundational in statistical hypothesis testing. 1940 Carl von Frisch decodes the dance honeybees used to communicate the location of flowers. 1944 Barbara McClintock breeds maize plants for color, which leads to the discovery of jumping gens. 1947 John Barden and Walter Brattain fabricate the first working transistor. 1951 Solomon Asch shows how group pressure can persuade an individual to conform to an obviously wrong opinion. 1952 Alfred Hershey and Amp Martha Chase Hershey-Chase experiment proves that DNA is the hereditary material. 1953 Stanley L. Miller and Amp Harold C. Urey Miller-Urey experiment demonstrates that organic compounds can arise spontaneously from inorganic ones. 1955 Clyde L. Cowan and Frederick Rain confirm the existence of the neutrino in the neutrino experiment. 1958 Michelson-Stahl experiment proves that DNA replication is semi-conservative. 1960 B.F. Skinner's demonstrations of operant conditioning. 1961 Crick, Brenner et al. Experiment. 1961 Nirenberg and Mathieu experiment. 1964 Nirenberg and Leder experiment. 1965 Arno Penzias Robert Wilson, Cosmic Microwave Background Radiation, Evidence of the Big Bang. 1967 Kerem Kerimov launches the Cosmos 186 and Cosmos 188 as experiments on automatic docking, eventually leading to the development of space stations. 1970 Alan and Beatrix Gardner teach American Sign Language to the chimpanzee Washoe. 1974 Stanley Milgram experiment on obedience to authority. 1995 Eric A. Cornell and Carl E. Wieman synthesize Bose-Einstein condensate.